All right, looks like we've got another deep dive on our hands today. And this one, wow, this is a big one. TikTok and the Supreme Court.
It is huge.
Yeah.
It's a very significant case.
I mean, we're talking a potential ban of TikTok in the U.S. A lot of people probably thought that was done and over with.
Right.
But the Supreme Court is going to hear this case challenging a law that could basically kick TikTok out of the United States. And get this, they're making this decision just 9 days before that law is supposed to go into effect.
Yeah, January 10th is the day.
Yeah. So this is going to be interesting. So we're obviously going to talk about freedom of speech issues. We're going to talk about millions of users here in the U.S., tons of small businesses that rely on TikTok. And we're also going to talk about national security implications. And, of course, we have to talk about Trump. I mean, come on.
Of course.
He's he's all over this thing, it seems like.
Well, he met with the CEO of TikTok at Mar-a-Lago the same day the appeal was filed with the Supreme Court.
Oh, wow. So this is going to be a very tangled web, I think, that we're going to have to untangle today.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, there are a lot of angles to approach this from. And I think one of the most interesting ones to me is the fact that some everyday people have actually joined this lawsuit.
Oh, really?
Alongside TikTok.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they filed a lawsuit.
So they're like co-plaintiffs or something?
I guess so.
Yeah.
I mean, it's TikTok and then a group of individuals who use the app.
Yeah.
And I think that's so smart on TikTok's part because that instantly, it makes it less about like a big tech company like fighting with the U.S. government, and it brings in this human element.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Kind of personalizes it a little bit.
It does. It does. And, the stories are actually really compelling. You've got a rancher in Montana who uses TikTok to teach people about agriculture.
Interesting.
A woman who creates videos about parenting and mental health.
Oh, wow.
An advocate for sexual assault survivors.
Wow.
And these are their platforms.
That's a really, really good point.
It's how they reach their audiences. And for them, this ban, it's not just about, corporate profits or international disputes. It's about their livelihoods and it's about their communities.
Yeah, and their ability to express themselves freely, which I guess goes back to the whole freedom of speech issue.
It does.
So, okay, so we've got real people, we've got these really compelling stories, but let's get down to the nitty-gritty here. What is this law that everyone keeps talking about? Like, what's the actual problem here?
Well, the law is called the Foreign Adversary Controlled Applications Act. Bit of a mouthful.
Catchy.
But basically, it's aimed at apps that are controlled by, you guessed it, foreign adversaries.
Right. So in this case, China.
Right. And for TikTok, the concern boils down to its parent company, ByteDance, which is Chinese.
Okay, so China's the adversary in this situation. But what are we worried about specifically? I mean, is it just because it's a Chinese company, or is there something more to it?
The big fear is data security. The U.S. government is worried that because of this Chinese ownership, TikTok might be forced to hand over user data to the Chinese government.
Okay, so that's where the national security risk comes in.
Exactly.
Okay, I can see that. I mean, it makes sense on the surface, but I have to ask, haven't other social media companies, Facebook, Instagram, haven't they been accused of mishandling user data too? What makes TikTok different?
Well, that's a question TikTok is definitely asking too. They're arguing that this law is unfairly singling them out, that it violates their First Amendment rights, and that their data collection practices are really no different from any other social media giant.
Okay, so they're basically saying, if you're going to go after us, you got to go after everybody.
Right. And they're also highlighting the potential economic harm.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Not just to the company itself, but to all those users and businesses that rely on it. If TikTok gets banned, that's a lot of people who are going to be impacted.
Yeah, absolutely. So they're saying this is an economic issue, this is a freedom of speech issue. It's pretty smart to kind of frame it that way rather than just focusing on the data and the national security aspect, right?
Yeah, I think by bringing in the First Amendment, they're really trying to broaden the conversation.
Make it about more than just data.
Yeah, make it about expression and the role of this platform, which is especially interesting when you consider just how influential TikTok is, particularly with younger generations.
Yeah, absolutely. And that influence, it seems like it even extends to Donald Trump, right? I mean, didn't he meet with the TikTok CEO right around the time all of this was going down?
Yeah, he did. Shouzi Chu, the CEO of TikTok, met with Trump at Mar-a-Lago the same day they filed their petition with the Supreme Court.
Now that's interesting.
It is.
Talk about timing. But wait, didn't Trump, Wasn't he the one who was trying to ban TikTok when he was president?
He
What's
was.
going on here?
Well, things have certainly changed since then, haven't they? The political landscape is different, and Trump himself has actually been making some interesting comments about TikTok lately. He's even said that he has a warm spot for TikTok,
What?
and he suggested that the app actually helped him gain support from younger voters in the recent election.
Really?
Yeah.
So he's gone from wanting to ban it to saying it helped him win? What's going on?
Well, it's definitely an interesting twist. And it gets even more complicated when you consider that one of Trump's major backers, Jeff Yass, is a significant investor in ByteDance through his company.
Hold on a second. So a key Trump supporter actually stands to benefit if TikTok survives this ban.
That's right. It's
Yeah.
a very tangled web indeed.
Okay, this is already so much more complicated than I thought it was going to be.
It is. With
Let's-
Trump back in the White House and his potential influence on the incoming administration, the stakes are even higher now.
Yeah, it's like, what's his stance on all this? Like, is he going to try to ban it again? Is he going to support it now? It's hard to say, right?
It's
Yeah.
very hard to say. He's known for his unpredictability, so it really is anyone's guess at this point. But I think it's safe to say that this case just got a whole lot more interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is shaping up to be a real nail biter.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, is this all just political, or are we really talking about national security?
That's what I'm wondering. I mean, it feels like we've been here before with TikTok, right? Didn't Trump try to do this whole ban thing back in 2020?
He did. He actually tried to force ByteDance to sell off TikTok's U.S. operations.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
There were even talks about Microsoft and Oracle stepping in as potential buyers.
Right. It's
Yeah.
all coming back to me now.
Yeah. It's interesting how that whole saga really brought those concerns about Chinese ownership and data access to the forefront.
Yeah, it's like, how much risk are we willing to tolerate? Where do we draw the line between protecting national security and infringing on individual freedoms in this digital age?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's not an easy one to answer.
It's not. And I mean, on the one hand, you've got TikTok repeatedly denying that they've ever handed over user data to the Chinese government.
Right?
And a lot of experts say their data collection practices are pretty much in line with what other social media companies are doing.
That's true. Their argument is essentially that if you're concerned about TikTok, you should be equally concerned about all the other platforms out there.
Right. It's like whataboutism, but for tech.
Exactly. But then you can't just completely ignore the fact that China has a history of using its tech companies to advance its own interests.
Right.
So that possibility, however small, is still there.
That TikTok could be forced to cooperate with the Chinese government.
Exactly. And that's what makes this case so difficult.
Uh-huh.
It's not black and white. It's very nuanced.
Yeah, totally. And it's like, how do you measure that risk? How do you even begin to quantify something like that?
That's what the Supreme Court is going to have to grapple with.
It's a tough one for sure. And I keep thinking back to those TikTok users we talked about earlier.
The rancher, the parenting advocate,
Yeah.
the sexual assault survivor.
It's like, for them, this isn't just some abstract legal debate. This is their lives, their livelihoods.
Their communities.
Yeah, it's real.
It is very real. And it's a good reminder that this case has far-reaching consequences. It's not just about TikTok. It's about setting a precedent for how we deal with foreign-owned tech companies in the future.
Yeah, if they can ban TikTok, what's next?
Exactly. It's a slippery slope argument, but it's a valid one.
So let's talk about the Supreme Court. What are the possible outcomes here? Best case scenario for TikTok, what happens?
Well, the best case scenario for TikTok is that the Supreme Court strikes down the law as unconstitutional.
Okay.
They could argue that it violates First Amendment rights, that it unfairly targets TikTok, and that there's no compelling evidence to justify such a drastic measure.
Okay, so that would be a huge win for TikTok.
It would. It would be a major setback for the government's attempts to regulate foreign-owned apps.
Right, so that's the best case.
Right.
What about the worst case? What if the court rules in favor of the government?
Then the law stands, and TikTok is in a really tough spot.
Yeah.
They would essentially have two options.
Yeah.
Either sell off their U.S. operations to an American company, or risk being completely banned from app stores in the U.S.
Wow, so millions of users could potentially lose access to TikTok overnight.
It would be a digital earthquake, that's for sure.
No kidding. Either way, it's clear this is going to be a landmark decision, one that will have ripple effects throughout the tech world.
It is. It's a bellwether for the future of online freedom
Yeah.
and the balance of power between governments and these tech giants. We're talking about the future of the internet as we know it.
Yeah. No pressure on the Supreme Court or anything, but
Right.
this is big. This is really big.
It is. And it highlights just how much We're still figuring out how to regulate something as complex and as ever-evolving as technology.
Totally. The law always seems to be playing catch-up, doesn't it?
It does. And as technology advances even faster in the years to come,
Mm.
we can only expect more of these legal battles to arise.
It makes you wonder, what's the internet going to look like in 5, 10, 20 years?
It's hard to even imagine.
I know. I'm just hoping we can find a way to balance all these different interests. Security, freedom, innovation.
It's a delicate balance for sure,
Yeah.
and one that we need to be actively discussing as a society.
Yeah.
I think this case is a reminder that we all have a stake in this. It's not just about scrolling and liking, it's about being informed, being engaged.
That's a good point. We're not just passive users of technology. We have a responsibility to shape the digital world we want to live in.
Exactly.
It's pretty empowering when you think about it that way.
It is, and this isn't over yet. The Supreme Court hearing in January is going to be crucial.
Yeah.
What they decide will have massive implications for years to come.
Yeah, no doubt. This whole TikTok saga really encapsulates a lot of the dilemmas we're facing in this digital age, right?
It does.
National security versus free speech.
Government regulation versus corporate power.
And ultimately, our individual rights in this increasingly interconnected world. It's a lot to think about.
It is. And it leads to some pretty big questions.
Yeah.
Questions I think we all need to be asking ourselves.
Yeah. Like what?
Like, how do we ensure that our fundamental freedoms are protected online as technology continues to blur the lines between our physical and digital lives?
Yeah.
What role should governments play in regulating these tech companies? And where's the line between national security and individual liberty?
Those are tough questions, but they're important ones. I think this case is a real wake-up call. It's time for us to be more aware, more engaged as digital citizens.
Couldn't agree more. We're living in an incredible time, a time of rapid technological advancement, and we need to be having these conversations. We need to be actively shaping the future of the internet.
Yeah, well said. It's kind of crazy to think about all this from like a really big picture perspective. Like
Yeah.
it's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day,
The legal back and forth.
Right, but this case could have a huge impact on the future of the internet, right?
Absolutely. We're talking about the kind of internet we want to have, you know.
Yep.
Are we headed towards a future where governments have more and more control, where they can just decide what we can access, what we can share? A world where the internet's fragmented, you know.
Like different countries having totally different online experiences.
Exactly. It's like, imagine a world where the internet you experience is completely different depending on where you live.
That's kind of scary.
It is.
Yeah.
In this TikTok case, it could be a turning point. If U.S. government manages to ban TikTok, other countries might be tempted to do the same, to just start banning any app or platform they see as a threat.
It's like a domino effect.
Exactly. And once you start down that path, it's hard to know where it ends.
So what can we do? Like besides just staying informed and talking about it, is there anything else we can do?
Well, I think awareness is
Yeah.
huge. But there are a lot of organizations out there that are fighting for digital rights groups, that advocate for things like net neutrality, privacy, free speech online.
Okay.
Supporting those groups is one way to make your voice heard, to actually have an impact.
Yeah, it's like this isn't just about TikTok anymore. It's about taking a stand for the kind of internet we want to live in.
Exactly. We're not just passive users here. We have a voice, and we have a responsibility to use it.
That's a good point. It's empowering to think about it that way.
And remember, this isn't over yet. The
Oh.
Supreme Court hearing in January is going to be huge. Whatever they decide will have massive implications for years to come.
No doubt. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
We will. But in the meantime, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay engaged.
Well said. Well, that wraps up our deep dive into the TikTok ban and everything that comes with it.
A lot to unpack there.
Yeah, there really is. Hopefully this has given you a better understanding of what's going on and maybe even sparked some of your own questions.
Maybe even some healthy debate.
Right. And if you want to learn more, there are tons of resources out there. We'll include some links in the show notes. But until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay engaged. See you later.